What's going on, y'all? It's Cone back here again today with another episode of After the Buzzer, the show where I recap the NBA games from the night. We might have just witnessed one of the craziest basketball games to ever be played in the history of the NBA, any other league, any amateur league, just people playing pickup on the street. This may be the craziest one that has ever happened. It's almost certainly top 3 craziest games that I've ever witnessed with my own 2 eyes. I still cannot believe the basketball game that I just watched. It's about 15 minutes after the game wrapped up, and the only reason why I'm recording this video 15 minutes after it wrapped up is because I couldn't leave my seat and I was speechless for those first 15 minutes. I cannot believe what just happened. When you take into account the basketball, the crazy plays, the narratives in the game alone, the buzzer beater game winner that we'll talk about a lot in this video, the fact that the Celtics have a chance on Monday to become the first team to ever come back from 0-3 down in an NBA playoff series, the overspanning narratives across these entire playoffs. There is so much coming into this game and this series as a whole, and it's all gonna come to a head in Game 7. I cannot wait for that game. The stakes are going to be ridiculous. But first, we've got to talk about what happened in this Game 6. Again, so many storylines to get into. I'm going to be a bit more disorganized than I typically am because usually I take some time to write down some reference points. I have none of that. Over here on the side, I have the ESPN box score pulled up. I've got my thoughts from watching the game. We're just going to dive straight into this. I'm purely running off basketball adrenaline at this point. So, let's get into it. For a majority of the game, the biggest storyline was Jimmy Butler, who probably had the worst playoff game that he's had in quite some time. Jimmy in this game could not buy a bucket whatsoever. He shot 5 of 21 from the field. Now his playmaking and his rebounding was solid, 8 assists and 11 boards. He did end up putting up a total of 24 points in the end, but he couldn't knock down a shot for anything. He was hitting at the free throw line, which came up big later on in this game. But not only was he missing like layups and the typical jumpers we see Jimmy Butler hit, but the defense was horrific. He could not keep up with Jason Tatum, who torched him in the first half for 25 points. Now Tatum calmed down a lot in the second half. He started the first half, like I said, with 25 points. I finished with 31. He shot horrifically in the second half, which is something else we'll talk about in this game. But Jimmy Butler was playing terribly on both ends of the court. And for a guy that has been pretty unanimously one of the top 3 players, 2 players probably, in these entire playoffs, it was crazy to see. And now Boston has done a great job of stopping Jimmy Butler the past couple of games, but it felt like in this Game 6 where the Heat need him now more than ever to try and win this on their home court, where many people think it's their last chance to make a stand because winning Game 7 in Boston after all this is going to be really, really difficult. You would think that Jimmy would step up. These are the moments that he's built for, and he completely collapsed. And I do think part of it is the fact that I think his ankle is really bothering him, the ankle that he's injured a couple of times. He's tweaked it a few times throughout these playoffs. I think the first time it got hurt was when Josh Hart landed on it in the Knicks series. I think that is bothering him because I think he seems a bit slower. His lateral quickness on defense isn't quite there. The lift is definitely not there. Like, he's not even dunking. There was one play where he had a wide open lane to the basket and could have dunked it, but he kind of just put his hands over and dropped the ball in. He doesn't seem like his typical self. But regardless whether he's injured or not, that doesn't matter because the Celtics were going right at him defensively and offensively. They weren't worried about him, and it reached a point where Jimmy wasn't even looking at the rim. There were a couple of times, I think in particular, one moment that stood out to me was right at the end of the third quarter when Jimmy Butler had Derek White one-on-one, and Derek White had been destroying him on that end all night. He blocked him at least a couple of times, I believe, at least once that I can think of. I think it was a couple of times. He played some great defense as well that wasn't necessarily a block, but he was clamping up on Jimmy Butler, showing exactly why Derek White was all defensive caliber this season, and it got in Jimmy's head between him and Robert Williams' rim protection. Jimmy at the end of the third quarter had a look where he was one-on-one with Derek White and stopped. Like, he pulled up to try and pass out to someone else. He wasn't even looking at the rim at one point, which is not what we typically see from Jimmy Butler. And so this was the biggest storyline all throughout this game. While meanwhile, Bam Adebayo also could not buy a bucket. The Heat stars just were not showing up. Bam finished this game shooting 4 of 16 from the field. He had 11 points, 13 boards. He had some good defensive moments at the end and a couple key rebounds, but the 2 stars for this team shot 9 of 37 in this game, and the biggest moment when the Heat really needed them, they just did not show up. And it's not what we've come to expect from this Heat squad. Now, the rest of the guys on the roster, at least most of them, played phenomenally. Caleb Martin continues to be great. I think if the Heat end up winning this series, he should win Eastern Conference Finals MVP. In this game, he shot 7 of 13. He had 21 points, 15 boards. He was amazing, kept them afloat for basically the entire game while nobody else was scoring. Duncan Robinson had a couple of massive threes. Now, he also missed a couple down the stretch that would have been huge, but he ended up shooting 3 of 6 from deep, 5 of 11 shooting. He had 13 points. And when Jimmy Butler and Bam Adebayo couldn't put the ball in the basket, they went to Duncan Robinson more than a couple of times, and he delivered. So shout to Duncan Robinson. Again, if he hit a couple more of those threes, Pat Riley might have dropped another $90 million contract at his locker before the game ended. But this was the story of the night for the Miami Heat. The Celtics defense was stifling them. Robert Williams was ridiculous at the rim the entire night. Derek White was clamping up Jimmy Butler. Al Horford was also playing great defense. The stars could not get going, but the role players for the Heat kept them in this game, as well as the overall three-point shooting, because at one point the Heat were shooting 22% inside the paint. The three-point shot was in favor of the Heat tonight. They would end up shooting 46.7% from deep, while the Celtics shot just 7 of 35. It was 20% shooting from them. So the three ball was keeping the Heat in the game the entire night. That's the only reason they were in this all the way up until the end. And for a bit, it looked like it might end up being enough, because I think with around like 9-8 minutes left in the fourth quarter, the Heat took a lead. They finally went up after trailing for basically the entire game. The Celtics had taken a couple of double-digit leads, but the Heat always stayed within striking distance, and they did enough to end up taking the lead in a moment that I couldn't believe, because it felt like the Heat should be down 20, but because of the three ball, they were staying in the game just as much as they needed to eventually strike back. But then the Celtics, within a minute, went on an 8-0 run. It looked like they got their mojo back, and they went up by 10 with about 4 minutes to go, and it seemed like it was all over for the Heat, and we were all but guaranteed to get a Game 7. But then Jimmy Butler remembered how to play basketball, and all of a sudden he's aggressive. He's attacking the rim. He's drawing and ones. He's drawing contact and getting to the free throw line. He's doing the things that Jimmy Butler typically does, even if his shot isn't falling, and he brought this thing all the way back. I think they were down 1 when Duncan Robinson got a transition 3 that he was pretty wide open for. He pulled up, and if he had hit that, that's one of those shots I was talking about earlier, where if he hit that, Pat Riley was going to throw him a supermax or something like that, but he ends up missing. They get the rebound. They get the ball to Marcus Smart, who goes 1 of 2 at the line, and the Heat don't call timeout. Eric Spoelstra looks at Jimmy Butler and says, what do you want to do? Jimmy says, I'm going to go ahead and take this thing. He dribbles the ball up the court, looks for a shot, isn't quite finding it. He dribbles over to the corner where he tries to pull it for 3, but he gets fouled by Al Horford, and they reviewed this a couple of times to see if it was a 2 or a 3. It was a 3. So Jimmy Butler, after having one of the worst games of his entire playoff run, one of the worst playoff games that we've seen from Jimmy Butler in quite some time, he's going to the line down 2 with 3 free throws to try and give the Heat a 1-point lead to potentially send them to the NBA Finals and avoid the potential disastrous Game 7 where they would blow a 3-0 lead with 3 seconds to go. And Jimmy Butler, the player that he is, knocks all 3 of them down. The Heat are up 1 with about 3 seconds to go. Now, something else very important to keep in mind with this foul is that they were looking at the clock like this entire time, and they ended up changing the time left from like 2.1 or 2.2 seconds to 3. So they gave them about 0.9, 0.8 more seconds, which in the NBA is a lifetime. And that, like, 0.9, less than a second time frame that they added to that clock ended up being incredibly valuable to the Celtics. They call a timeout, they inbound the ball to Marcus Smart. The Heat double team Jason Tatum. Max Strus comes up to help to make sure that Tatum isn't the one who gets the ball. They get to Marcus Smart, and in these moments, this feels like a shot that Marcus Smart might hit, but he misses it, and it bounces off. It goes like in and out, it toilet bowls, and the rebound goes to Derek White, and Derek White catches it and puts it back up and in. I thought the game was over. I legitimately looked away the second the shot missed. I didn't even see it the first time. I watched the replay and realized, oh my God, he put that in. And like, that was the moment where I realized the Celtics had done it. I had a friend over, my friend Matt, one of my best friends. He's a Heat fan, and we were watching the game together, and he was going crazy. I was high-fiving him, and we looked over, and the Celtics had won. Derek White put the ball up and in because he wasn't boxed out, and it's because Max Strus went over to double Jason Tatum. That was their plan, keep the ball away from JT. He drew that attention so that Derek White was free to run right past Max Strus on the perimeter, go up there for the offensive board, and credit to him, he didn't just look, watch the shot, he actually ran after the offensive rebound, he got it, put it back up and in to force a Game 7 with the Celtics having the chance to become the first team to ever overcome an 0-3 series deficit. It's genuinely one of the wildest playoff moments that I will ever remember. Like, this is a game with all the drama, with Jimmy Butler being terrible and then turning back into his old self right at the end of the game with his heroics down the stretch, with Duncan Robinson hitting crazy threes, with Jason Tatum having a big half at the beginning, falling apart down the stretch, only for Marcus Smart to step up, for Derek White to make the craziest play, one of the craziest plays I've ever seen, a generational type hustle play. This is one of those games that I'm going to remember forever. And Derek White, according to ESPN Stats and Info here on Twitter, is the second player in NBA history to make a game-winning buzzer beater when facing elimination with his team trailing prior to the shot. The only other guy to do this is Michael Jordan in 1989 versus the Cleveland Cavaliers. It's Derek White and Michael Jordan as the two greatest players to ever play the game. This is unbelievable. I cannot fathom the fact that the Celtics ended up winning that game. It seemed like it was over. Marcus Smart had missed the shot. They had just 3 seconds. I don't know how Derek White caught that ball and had the wherewithal to put it back up and in and make that shot with that little time to go. It's just unbelievable. Moments like this are why I love the game of basketball so much. You just never know what's going to go on. And now, again, we go to a Game 7 where the Celtics have a chance to close this thing out and make history to advance to their second NBA Finals in a row after being the most unserious team of all time. They're the most confusing and frustrating, really good team I have ever watched play basketball, and they are this close to pulling off something that no other team in NBA history has done, and they've got a great shot to do it because this is a unbefore-seen scenario where the team that's going back to play this Game 7 after being down 0-3 is the home team. We have never seen this scenario. Every other time it's happened, and it's only been 3 times, the lower seed was the one that was going to the opposing team's arena to play that Game 7. The Celtics are going to be at home. And now they've won 3 straight games. They have all this momentum. The Heat just got their hearts crushed right there at the buzzer. And the Heat are an incredibly resilient team. Like, if there's any squad that's going to be able to overcome this moment, it is the Miami Heat. Like, they are built for moments like this where their backs are against the wall and everybody's doubting them and they still find a way to pull it out. But things are not looking great for the Heat. My last video I titled "The Heat Are in Trouble" because it felt like the momentum was snowballing, and a lot of people commented on that video saying the Heat are still up. And I even said in that video, I still thought the Heat were going to get it done. I thought tonight they would close this thing out in 6 games. I just didn't believe they would collapse like this, but they did. And then they came back because it was almost like a microcosm of their whole season where for a lot of the game, it's like, oh, they're just kind of hanging around. They're not really that good. And right there at the end, they show you, this is what we can be. We can make these crazy plays and still find ways to win, even if it's the ugliest game of basketball that you have ever seen. But they fell just short. And I have to wonder if that's the ending that we're going to see next game. And I've seen a lot of people already talking about the fact that, you know, how crazy is it if you're an 8 seed? Like, is it really that embarrassing to lose to the Celtics? And I'll let y'all make your own takes about that. But I can let you know that being the 1 in 151 is not a great look. That is not something you want on your resume. Becoming the only team to ever have that happen, it's horrific. And after such a wild run for the Heat, genuinely one of the craziest, most unpredictable, and most fun times I've ever had watching a team play playoff basketball, one of the most unexpected playoff runs in the history of the sport, might come to an end in one of the most unexpected ways possible. A lot of people were thinking that the Heat would get to this point and get swept by the Celtics, or they'd lose in 5 games or 6 games, or like I predicted, the Celtics would win in 7 games, which might end up coming to fruition on Monday. But nobody thought it would go this way. And when the Heat went up 3-0, I even said in my video where I said that the Heat and the Nuggets just felt like the better teams, that I thought the Heat were just going to blow out the Celtics in Game 4 because the Celtics' body language was terrible in Game 3. It seemed like they didn't want to be there, and it just seemed like the Heat had their number. They were the team of destiny in the Eastern Conference, and that it was over. And here we are like a week later or so. It's not over yet. The Celtics are the favorites to pull this thing out. Me and many others were already talking about what a Heat Nuggets finals would look like. There were people in the timeline complaining, saying that, oh, I wanted to see the Celtics. Everybody acted like it was a foregone conclusion that it would be Nuggets versus Heat, because we don't see these things happen. It doesn't happen in the game of basketball, but we're this close. This is the 4th time it's ever happened. The past 3, the team that was originally up 3-0 ended up surviving to win the series. We'll have to see what happens in Game 7. I cannot wait for that matchup. I'm, of course, going to make a video following it, whatever happens. I was originally going to drop, like, a couple of videos leading up to the NBA Finals, but I don't have as much time anymore because I thought this series would be over at this point. Now I'm glad we're getting more basketball because whenever this series ends, we've got no hoops, at least NBA playoff hoops. There's other hoops out there, of course, but no NBA playoff hoops until June 1st when the NBA finals finally roll around. So I'm glad we're still getting hoops, but just to let you know, my content schedule is now way off. You're going to get an NBA finals preview probably Wednesday of next week, the day before the finals start. So be on the lookout for that. Of course, on Tuesday, you'll get a recap of the game. On Monday, I think you're going to get a video talking a little bit about Nikola Jokic and his journey up to this point. I think it's going to be a really fun video. I've got it almost done up to this point, so that should be a really fun one as well. And yeah, I feel like I've been rambling for a long time. This video might have gone longer than I meant it to. Again, I get in these states when I watch these games where I feel like I just need to just say everything that's on my mind and talk about how exciting it was, how amazing the game of basketball is, the series is. And, you know, that's kind of where this YouTube channel came from, is because I just wanted to talk more about hoops. So I appreciate y'all for watching this video. Please make sure to leave a like and subscribe if you enjoyed it. Helps the channel out a ton. Comment down below, who do you have winning Game 7? And what's your take? If the Heat end up losing this, where do they belong in history? Is this a success of a season because they went from 8 seed to the conference finals? Is it a complete disaster because they, you know, became the first team to ever blow a 3-0 series lead? Let me know what your take is down in the comment section below. Yeah, and I mean, let me know if you think either of these teams could beat the Denver Nuggets. I mean, the Denver Nuggets are chilling at home. They've been there for a while now. They're getting well rested. They're loving this. So I will see what ends up happening on Monday. But for right now, I appreciate y'all watching as always. I will see you all later. Everyone say it back.